What's going on, guys, and welcome to this brand new series. As you can probably tell by the title, we are going to be taking a deeper dive into the world of Photoshop, which I use pretty much every day to do some designing in. And it is without a doubt the best photo editing and designing program that you can get out there for that particular type of editing. So this first episode is going to be about the interface itself. We are not going to be creating anything in this episode. We're going to save that for later. But once you open Photoshop, you'll probably get something like this, or even something like this with those two lines, but I prefer to have everything in one line because I use Photoshop in full screen, so you probably won't, so it probably doesn't matter which way or another. I'm just used to having it like this. But before we start with anything else, let me just open the thumbnail for this series, just so that we have something to look at. Now this is completely created in Photoshop from the bottom, from like a white like this to, just see, what did I have? Not that, this and this. Alright, so this is when you have created something, it will look like this. You'll have the menu up here, or the name of the file that you're using. You can also click and drag it to release it from the, or make it a separate window. And as you now can see down at the menu bar here, or the toolbar, is that the Windows toolbar is that we have two separate files, or two separate windows. But if we snap this back on, it will go back to be one separate or one complete window. I know many designers like to use this because they can have more images and work on separate files side by side, but I like having it that way because I like, you know, doing just one thing at a time. And if you just go ahead and open, let's see, what else can we open? We can open this. We get the both of them right here, so it really doesn't matter. You can just use the Control Tab shortcut to quickly switch between. You don't even have to move your cursor to do it. It's very nice. So as you can see, on my left side on the screen is all the tools that you will be using when using Photoshop, except some of the tools you can find up here. But here are the essential tools that you probably will use all the time. There are some tools I haven't used, like History Brush tool, which is probably a very good tool, but I never use it, so I don't really know what it does. But all of these tools are pretty much essential to me when I am creating something in Photoshop. And I'm not gonna walk you through every piece of these tools, because later on in this series of tutorials, or whatever you want to call it, we are going to most likely be touching on pretty much every single of these tools. So you will probably get some more information in another or a future episode. And up top here, and you know, before we start on anything else, I actually want to, if you zoom out a bit, just hold in Alt and scroll, or press Z on your, or Z, or whatever the fuck you want to call it. Just do this, and you can press right mouse click to zoom in, and hold Alt, the Alt key on your keyboard, and press and left mouse click to zoom back out. Or you can just simply hold down the Control key on your, or no, the Alt key on your keyboard, and just scroll, which I do. I very rarely use the zoom tool. It's almost never, because it's just so much easier just to hold down Alt. So the thing I wanted to talk about or do before is, you can see my Photoshop is pretty much in a dark black color, which yours might not be. This is just how I like to have it. You can right click outside of your image, like on the dark gray canvas around here, and you can choose the color. Now as default it's very dark, which actually is what I want, but you can pick it to black, which I don't really think looks that good, because if I were to add another layer here and choose black on that, do not have this, I have no, and zoom in, I have no idea when my canvas starts or ends without having any others. And sometimes you will be working with black layers, so it's not a huge so it's pretty much a big disadvantage to have a black background behind your canvas. You can also set a custom color, and which I don't really see the need to do that. I pretty much use the dark gray, which I've used pretty much ever since I started doing Photoshop, at least in CS6 and CC, which I'm using now. But I think the default color goes pretty well. Now if you want to change the color of all this around, if you want like go back to CS3 and CS4 days when it was like very light gray, all you have to do is go to edit and preferences and general. As you can see, Control K is a shortcut, and go down to interface, and here you also have the here are the color themes. I'm currently using the dark black, or the dark gray one rather. Here's a touch lighter gray, which I also have been using a lot. And here is some very light gray, and here's some even lighter gray. This color, I feel like it makes it look more of an old type of program, like Photoshop was before. Now this, I feel like this just makes it look slicker and more fresh, I think. Okay, so now that you have, hopefully you can understand how to make Photoshop look like you want. So let's head over to the right side. Now here I've done some different customizations. I've added color and swatches. You can add swatches for yourself. On another computer I have a swatch group called, you can see all the color groups right here. On my other computer I have a swatch group called, well, in the winter of 2013 I did a lot of designing by using something called, you know, that very flat design, very flat colors, which was very popular in 2013. And then it's very easy to, or very helpful to create your own swatch group, so you can just simply, instead of picking it, instead of going into color picker and picking some color every single time, you just have to go to swatches, and then there are all your swatches, which are the typical minimal colors, which is kind of like, it's not a strong color, but it's like a color that is somewhat faded out a bit, and it's not that very, you know, bright and right on color. So these are very important to me to have up here. Also the adjustments, I pretty much use adjustment layers in all of my designing, all of my design projects. So you don't have to have those here, and the styles I almost never use. I can actually remove that because I never use it, but I've never removed it because it wasn't really in my way, because it would always stand on adjustments here anyway, so it didn't really matter what's were there. But so you can, if you want to like reposition this, you can just simply drag it over and then it will snap over, or you can pull it out here and have it on your screen. But I feel it's like it's way more clean, having way more clean look when you have everything like concentrated on your right and left side, and just can concentrate on the image that we'll be creating in the middle. So if you don't want the adjustments here, you can simply just, if you want to add a adjustment layer to any one of the layers that you originally have here, you can simply just go down to the bottom here where you either delete, create a new layer, create a new folder, add adjustment layers, masks and other effects, and you can simply just, you have the same choices down here as you have up here, but I find it to be way more easier because I recognize the different adjustments from the image instead of the actual name. So I will like, oh, I want some curves. Yeah, I can just simply click curves right there, because it's way much easier to remember images than it is to remember the actual name. At least that's my preference. It doesn't have to be your preference. And this sidebar right here, actually I was just going to talk about this last part. I don't know what the standard in Photoshop is when you first start it up with like how the layers are. Usually it is a very small box down here to the right where your layers are, but I've dragged it pretty much very long ways up, because I like to be able to see almost all of my layers in the same without having to scroll every single time when I want to find a new layer, either if I want to work on a layer that is on top or go down and work on the layer that is at the bottom. And it's just so much easier to have it all in one window instead of having to scroll all the way down every single time. So on this sidebar here, I have some effects that, you know, like history I almost never use, and actions I use them sometimes. I have some custom actions right here, like comic book set. If I want to make an image or a portrait look like a comic book, I can choose between different color books and comic books effects, and I can just go into the effect and just click play, and then it would automatically make the image. But it's very limited what I have here, and I almost never use it, so it doesn't really matter that much. Properties, really don't never use that either. It's just there to, I haven't removed it. I'm just used to having it there, even though I don't use it. And this is like, I think this, the brush preset, and the character and paragraph tools, these four are probably the most important tools to have in this sidebar, because this is tools you will be using pretty much all the time, especially when you're using text. Because if I let's see, if I go into the text, go into the tutorial, you can see that this has has a spacing between the letters of 115 pixels. Well, I don't know if that is pixels or what, but it's at least it's 115, and usually it is at 0. But to make the spacing look good and not having the letters like intertwine with each other or interfere with each other, it's very good. And that tool is also helpful to because in the thumbnail I made it like Photoshop tutorial, but the Photoshop word has way more letters than the tutorial word. So as you can see, the spacing in the tutorial word is much more bigger, is way bigger than the Photoshop spacing between the different characters. So it was 115 spacing in tutorial, and in Photoshop it is just at 40. So that says it. Also, there's a lot of different tools here as well. Italic, bold, caps only, which is a alternative to caps lock, but this is sometimes it's like turned on automatically. I don't know why it does that. And my caps lock is not turned on my keyboard, so it shouldn't really do anything, but it's pretty much this is a tool you could be using sometimes. It's really helpful. I've used it for these, except from the text and the sign, because I wanted that to be in lower caps. So one last thing before we end this episode is that I have rulers equipped around the edges, or around 2 of the edges, but you might not have them, so let me just remove them. Your Photoshop might look like this, so with no rulers on the top and on the left. So what you want to do is either press Ctrl R on your keyboard, or go into Window and down to down into View and Rulers, and the rulers come back on. Those are very, very important to have, because you can drag out lines from it, which will automatically snap onto the layer that you have chosen in your layer area, and they will automatically snap onto that. As you can see, it just automatically snaps on. You can turn that off and on and off here, but it's very useful to have on, because you can make the images or text align much easier when it's equipped. Yeah, before I forget, be sure to follow me on my Twitter if you want some news and updates on like what I'm doing in the YouTube world, like when I'm uploading, and if you have some requests to me, the best way to contact me is either through a YouTube message or Twitter. You can also check out my portfolio, which is over at Carbon Made, so it's ArtificialRest.carbonmade.com. You should have seen it on screen already. And also be sure to subscribe and like this video if you want to see more Photoshop tutorials. So I hope you have enjoyed this very first episode, and as you probably can see from over here, we have some spoilers. In the next episode we are going to be taking a look at resolutions, just basic resolutions, what you want to be using for your desktop if you are creating wallpapers, or if you are creating thumbnails, different mobile wallpapers, or whatever you want to be creating. I'm going to be going over some of the most usual and most used resolutions that are very good to know right out your head. And in the third episode we are going to be taking a look at some different color modes, RGB, some SMIC colors, and gray and white, and all that good stuff. So anyway, I hope you have enjoyed this very first episode, and be sure to stay tuned for the next one, and I'll talk to you guys later.